They laughed as the confused old man was removed from first class, whispering jokes about how he probably couldn't afford the seat. 24 hours later, the same executives were begging for mercy as their jobs disappeared with a single phone call from the man they had humiliated. Before we dive into this story, hit that like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories that make you question everything you think you know about power. The morning there at Denver International Airport carried the usual symphony of chaos. Rolling suitcases clicked against polished floors, gate announcements echoed through vaulted ceilings, and the aroma of overpriced coffee mingled with jet fuel. Terminal B buzzed with the energy of 1,000 travelers, each lost in their own world of connections and destinations. Among them walked a figure that seemed almost invisible. Vincent Rivera moved with the careful deliberation of a man who had learned that the world judges by appearances first and asks questions later. His weathered hands gripped a simple black carry-on, the kind you'd find at any discount store. His gray wool coat, though clean, showed the gentle wear of many journeys. Silver hair peeked from beneath a worn baseball cap, and wire-rimmed glasses sat slightly crooked on his nose. To every passerby, Vincent looked exactly like what he intended to be, another elderly passenger trying to navigate the modern complexities of air travel. But here's what nobody knew as they unconsciously stepped around him in the terminal corridors. Vincent Rivera wasn't just any passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Rivera Capital Management, investment firm so powerful that their decisions could make or break entire industries overnight. His net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries, and his phone contained the direct numbers of world leaders and Fortune 500 CEOs. Today, Vincent was traveling incognito on what his board believed was a routine inspection tour. For the past 6 months, Rivera Capital had been the largest institutional investor in Apex Airlines, pumping over $4 billion into their expansion and modernization efforts. The partnership had been hailed as a win-win, with Apex promising revolutionary improvements to customer service and passenger experience. Vincent wanted to see those improvements for himself, not through polished presentations or carefully orchestrated VIP visits, but through the eyes of an ordinary passenger. He had done this dozens of times across various industries, always learning more in a single undercover experience than months of boardroom reports could reveal. The boarding announcement for Flight 847 to Miami crackled through the speakers. Vincent checked his boarding pass, seat 2A, first class. He had specifically requested a premium seat, curious to experience Apex's much-touted luxury service revolution firsthand. As passengers began queuing at the gate, Vincent noticed the atmosphere. Stressed travelers juggled phones and documents. A young mother struggled with a crying baby while airport staff walked past without offering assistance. An elderly woman with a walker waited patiently as people pushed around her to reach the priority boarding lane. Vincent made mental notes of everything. Customer service began long before passengers stepped onto the aircraft. The gate agent, a young woman named Chelsea Martinez, according to her name tag, mechanically processed boarding passes with the enthusiasm of someone counting down minutes until her shift ended. When Vincent approached, she barely glanced up. "Boarding pass and ID?" she said flatly, extending her hand without making eye contact. Vincent handed over his documents. The boarding pass bore the name Vincent Rodriguez, a deliberate choice to blend in with the diverse passenger base. His identification, carefully prepared by his security team, matched perfectly. Chelsea scanned the pass and paused. Her brow furrowed as she looked at the screen, then at Vincent, then back to the screen. "Sir, there might be an issue with your seat assignment," she said, her tone already shifting toward suspicion. "What kind of issue?" Vincent asked calmly. "First-class passengers usually... well, they're typically..." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with verbalizing her assumption. Vincent understood immediately. His appearance didn't match her expectations of what a first-class passenger should look like. The worn coat, the discount luggage, the slightly shuffling gait he had adopted, none of it screamed premium traveler to someone making snap judgments. "They're typically..." what? Vincent pressed gently, genuinely curious how she would finish that sentence. Chelsea fumbled for words. They usually have status indicators, frequent flyer cards, platinum memberships, that sort of thing. I paid for my seat, Vincent said simply. Is there a problem with my payment? Chelsea scanned the pass again, and Vincent could see her confusion deepening. The ticket was legitimate, paid in full, with no red flags in the system. But something about the situation clearly bothered her. Just proceed to gate security, she said finally, though her tone suggested the conversation was far from over. Vincent walked down the jet bridge, noting how the cheerful customer service mask had slipped the moment his appearance didn't match expectations. This was exactly the kind of insight he had come to gather. The aircraft interior impressed him immediately. Apex had indeed invested in upgrades. The first-class cabin featured spacious leather seats with individual entertainment systems and thoughtful lighting. Flight attendants moved efficiently through pre-flight preparations, their uniforms crisp and professional. Vincent found seat 2A and began settling in, carefully observing the interactions around him. In 2B sat Marcus Thompson, a man whose designer suit and solid gold watch announced his wealth to anyone within viewing distance. Across the aisle, Natalie Kim tapped impatiently on her phone, her Hermes handbag strategically positioned to catch the light. Both had boarded without question, their appearances serving as invisible boarding passes to respectability. Vincent was adjusting his seatbelt when he noticed Chloe Johnson approaching. The senior flight attendant moved with purposeful strides, her expression serious. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stopping beside his seat. "I need to verify your boarding pass." Vincent looked up, maintaining the slightly confused expression he had perfected over years of undercover work. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine verification," Chloe said, though her tone suggested otherwise. She examined the boarding pass with unusual scrutiny, comparing it to information on her tablet. Marcus Thompson glanced over from 2B, his curiosity piqued. Other first-class passengers began paying attention to the developing situation. "Everything appears to be in order," Vincent said patiently. "I'd like to get settled for takeoff." Chloe hesitated. The documents were clearly legitimate, but something felt off to her. Vincent's appearance, his luggage, even the way he spoke, none of it aligned with her mental profile of their typical first-class clientele. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me for a moment," she said finally. Vincent felt a familiar mixture of disappointment and fascination. This was exactly the kind of discriminatory behavior that no amount of corporate training seemed to eliminate. The assumption that economic status could be determined by appearance and that certain people simply didn't belong in premium spaces. "Why?" he asked directly. Chloe glanced around nervously, aware that other passengers were listening. "It's just protocol. Please come with me." Vincent remained seated. What protocol, specifically? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Chloe realized she had no legitimate protocol to cite. Her suspicions were based entirely on appearance and assumptions, exactly the kind of profiling that could land the airline in serious legal trouble. But instead of backing down, she doubled down on her position. "Security needs to verify your identity," she said, raising her voice slightly. That single word, security, transformed the atmosphere instantly. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Passengers turned to stare. Phones began emerging from pockets, fingers poised over camera apps. Vincent understood that the situation had crossed a line. This was no longer about customer service training or unconscious bias. This was about power, respect, and the fundamental question of who belongs where in society. "I've shown you my boarding pass and identification. Both are legitimate. I'm not moving." His quiet defiance sent a ripple through the cabin. Marcus Thompson leaned forward, clearly entertained by the drama. Natalie Kim held her phone up, already recording. Chloe's face flushed red. She had committed to a course of action and now felt trapped by her own decisions. Rather than de-escalate, she reached for her radio. "We need security at Gate 12A," she announced loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. Vincent closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of decades crash over him. Memories flooded back, moments from his childhood when his family had been treated as less than human because of their economic status. Times when his mother had been followed through department stores, suspected of theft simply because her clothes weren't expensive enough. Instances when his father had been spoken to with condescension by bank managers who couldn't see past the calloused hands and work boots. He had built an empire partly to escape those judgments, but more importantly, to ensure others wouldn't have to endure them. Yet, here he was, experiencing the same prejudice that money was supposed to shield him from. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was,
"Sir, I need you to step off the aircraft while we sort this out," he said, his tone brooking no argument. Vincent remained seated. On what grounds? Disrupting flight operations, failure to comply with crew instructions. Take your pick. The second officer moved closer, clearly prepared to use physical force if necessary. Vincent understood that resistance would only escalate the situation further, potentially resulting in charges that would make the entire incident public prematurely. But he also understood something else. This moment, this exact situation, was why his undercover investigations mattered. This was the reality that corporate reports and diversity training sessions never captured. This was how power and prejudice intersected in the real world. Vincent stood slowly, his joints protesting after years of wear. "I want everyone here to remember this moment," he said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. "Remember how you felt watching this happen. Remember what you did or didn't do." Marcus Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly less entertained by the spectacle. Natalie Kim continued recording, but lowered her phone slightly, perhaps sensing the gravity in Vincent's words. As Vincent gathered his carry-on, Officer Rodriguez placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Let's go, sir. No need to make this harder than it has to be." Vincent allowed himself to be escorted down the aisle, past rows of passengers who watched in silence. Some looked away, uncomfortable with witnessing what they instinctively recognized as injustice. Others stared openly, phones capturing every moment. At the aircraft door, Vincent turned back briefly. The first-class cabin, with all its luxury and promise, represented more than just comfortable seating. It represented a system that sorted people into categories based on appearance, assumption, and prejudice. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said quietly to Chloe, who stood at the door watching his removal. She misinterpreted his words as a threat from a disgruntled passenger. "Sir, if you continue making threatening statements, we'll have to involve law enforcement." Vincent almost smiled at the irony. She thought she held the power in this situation. She had no idea that her actions were about to trigger consequences that would ripple through the airline industry like an earthquake. As Vincent was escorted through the terminal, past curious travelers and busy gate agents, his mind was already shifting from victim to strategist. The hurt and humiliation were real, they always were in moments like this. But underneath those emotions, a different kind of energy was building. He had come on this trip to assess Apex Airlines' customer service improvements. He had certainly learned everything he needed to know. The security office at Denver International was a sterile, windowless room that smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Vincent sat across from Officer Rodriguez, who was methodically filling out incident reports with the enthusiasm of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. "Name?" Rodriguez asked without looking up. "Vincent Rodriguez," Vincent replied, sticking to his cover identity. "Address." Vincent provided the address of a modest apartment his security team maintained for situations exactly like this. "Purpose of travel? Personal business." Rodriguez finally looked up, his expression skeptical. "Look, Mr. Rodriguez, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen every scam, every scheme, every sob story. You seem like a decent guy, but you were clearly trying to game the system somehow." Vincent tilted his head. "Game the system how exactly?" "Come on, you buy a first-class ticket, probably with a stolen credit card or points you somehow hacked, hoping nobody would check too closely. When they did, you played the discrimination card." The assumption was so far from reality that Vincent almost laughed. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. Officer Rodriguez, what if I told you that your assumption is not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong? Rodriguez snorted. Right, and I suppose you're secretly a millionaire just pretending to be a regular guy. Vincent said nothing, simply maintaining eye contact. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Rodriguez shifted in his chair, suddenly less certain. Look, we've verified your ID, and technically you didn't break any laws. The airline has the right to refuse service, and you complied with removal orders. You're free to go. Vincent allowed himself to stand slowly. Thank you for your professionalism, Officer Rodriguez. You've been more courteous than anyone else today. As Vincent gathered his belongings, Rodriguez felt compelled to add, for what it's worth, I think they overreacted. You aren't causing any real trouble. Vincent paused at the door. Sometimes, the biggest troubles come from the quietest places. Outside the security office, Vincent found a quiet corner of the terminal and pulled out his phone. The device looked ordinary, a slightly outdated smartphone with a cracked screen protector. But the contact list contained some of the most powerful names in global finance. His first call was to Maya Brooks, his chief operating officer and the only person who knew about his undercover activities. Vincent, Maya's voice carried immediate concern. You're supposed to be on a flight to Miami. Why are you calling from Denver? Change of plans, Vincent said simply. I need you to schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Full attendance required. Maya knew better than to ask questions when Vincent used that tone. Done. Anything else? Yes, I want a complete breakdown of our Apex Airlines investment. Every dollar, every contract, every commitment. I want it on my desk by tonight. There was a pause. Vincent, what happened? I learned everything I needed to know about Apex Airlines' customer service philosophy. Vincent's second call was to his personal attorney, Trevor White, who handled the kind of sensitive situations that required absolute discretion. Trevor, I need you to research discrimination law, specifically regarding airline passenger rights and equal treatment regardless of economic appearance. Trevor's sharp legal mind immediately grasped the implications. Are we talking about a lawsuit situation? We're talking about a complete reevaluation of our business relationships. Vincent's third call was to Logan Chen, Rivera Capital's head of public relations. Logan specialized in managing the media narrative around high-stakes corporate decisions. Logan, I need you to prepare for a significant announcement tomorrow. I can't give you details yet, but it will involve our airline investments and will likely generate substantial media attention. Positive or negative attention? Vincent considered the question. That depends on your perspective. As Vincent made his calls, Apex Airlines Flight 847 was pushing back from the gate, completely unaware that they had just triggered the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history. Chloe Johnson stood in the first-class galley preparing for takeoff service. She felt a nagging unease about the earlier incident, but pushed it aside. She had followed protocol, protected the airline's premium brand image, and maintained order on the aircraft. Her supervisors would approve of her decisive action. Marcus Thompson, settled comfortably in seat 2B, had already forgotten about the elderly man who had been removed. He was scrolling through stock portfolios on his tablet, unaware that one of those investments was about to experience a catastrophic change. At Apex Airlines headquarters in Chicago, executives were wrapping up another day of meetings about growth strategies and market expansion. CEO Derek Harrison was particularly pleased with their institutional investor relationships, especially the massive infusion of capital from Rivera Capital Management. Harrison had tried for years to meet Vincent Rivera personally, hoping to cement their business relationship with a face-to-face encounter. But Rivera was notoriously private, conducting most business through intermediaries and rarely appearing at industry events. What Harrison didn't know was that he had missed his chance for that meeting by approximately 4 hours and 3,000 miles. Vincent checked into a modest hotel near Denver International, the kind of place where his appearance wouldn't raise any eyebrows. In his room, he sat at the small desk and began making notes about everything he had observed. The discrimination hadn't been overt or malicious. Nobody had used slurs or made explicitly prejudicial statements. Instead, it had been subtle, systemic, and somehow more insidious because of its casual nature. Assumptions based on appearance, snap judgments about who belonged where, a complete failure to see past surface-level indicators to the human being underneath. Vincent had experienced versions of this throughout his life, even after achieving massive success. The difference was that now he had the power to do something about it. His laptop chimed with an encrypted email from Maya. The Apex Airlines investment breakdown was comprehensive and sobering. Rivera Capital Management owned $4.2 billion in stock, bonds, and debt instruments in Apex. They were the airline's largest single investor, holding enough influence to dictate major strategic decisions. Vincent opened a secure communication channel and began typing a message that would be delivered to Apex's board of directors first thing in the morning. The message was simple, professional, and devastating. Vincent woke up before dawn, his internal clock adjusted to East Coast time despite being in Colorado. Room service delivered coffee and a simple breakfast, the kind of anonymous efficiency he preferred when traveling incognito. At exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Time, Maya Brooks was walking into the Rivera Capital Management boardroom in Manhattan, carrying a sealed envelope that contained Vincent's instructions. The emergency board meeting had drawn all 12 directors, including some who had flown in overnight from Europe and Asia. The company's senior leadership team filled the remaining seats around the polished conference table. Maya stood at the head of the table, her expression unusually grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a directive from Vincent that requires immediate implementation." She opened the envelope and read the contents in a clear, steady voice. "Effective immediately, Rivera Capital Management is divesting all holdings in Apex Airlines. This includes $4.2 billion in stock, bonds, and debt instruments. The divestiture is to be completed within 48 hours regardless of market conditions or financial impact." The room erupted in shock.
Maya folded the letter. "Gentlemen, ladies, I suggest we focus on execution rather than speculation. Vincent's instructions are clear and time-sensitive." As the Rivera Capital Board absorbed the shock of Vincent's directive, automated trading systems were already beginning to execute massive sell orders. Thousands of shares of Apex Airlines stock hit the market simultaneously, triggering algorithmic responses from other institutional investors. At 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time, Apex Airlines stock price began to plummet. Derek Harrison was in his corner office overlooking Chicago's skyline when his assistant burst through the door without knocking, a breach of protocol that immediately signaled crisis. "Mr. Harrison, we have an emergency situation. Rivera Capital is dumping our stock." Harrison's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. "What do you mean, dumping?" "Massive sell orders, billions of dollars. The stock is down 18% and falling." Harrison set down his coffee with shaking hands. Rivera Capital was more than just their largest investor. They were the financial lifeline that had enabled Apex's aggressive expansion strategy. Their sudden divestiture wasn't just a stock price problem. It was an existential threat. "Get me Vincent Rivera on the phone, now." "Sir, we've never had direct contact with Mr. Rivera. All communications go through intermediaries." "Then get me the intermediaries. Get me someone. Find out what the hell is happening." As Harrison's assistant scrambled to make connections, similar scenes were playing out in offices across the airline industry. Apex's competitors watched in amazement as their rival's stock price collapsed for no apparent reason. Aviation analysts fired off urgent reports to clients, trying to explain a sudden market movement that made no logical sense. By 11 a.m., Apex's stock had lost 32% of its value. The company had shed over $2 billion in market capitalization in less than 2 hours. Harrison finally connected with someone at Rivera Capital, not Vincent himself, but a senior portfolio manager who spoke with the detached professionalism of someone delivering bad news. "Mr. Harrison, I can confirm that Rivera Capital is divesting all Apex Airlines holdings due to concerns about corporate culture and customer service practices." "Corporate culture?" Harrison's voice pitched higher. "What specific concerns? We've met every performance metric in our investor agreements. Our customer satisfaction scores are industry-leading. What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm not privy to the specific details of Mr. Rivera's assessment. I can only confirm that the divestiture is proceeding as directed." Harrison slammed the phone down, his mind racing. corporate culture and customer service. Those were vague terms that could mean anything. But Vincent Rivera didn't make $4 billion decisions on vague concerns. Something specific had happened, something that had triggered this catastrophic response. Harrison called an emergency meeting of his senior leadership team. Within an hour, 15 executives crowded into the boardroom, their faces reflecting the same confusion and panic that Harrison felt. "We need to figure out what triggered this. Rivera Capital doesn't dump investments on a whim. Something happened, and I want to know what it was." Emma Sullivan, Apex's head of customer relations, raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, there was an incident yesterday on Flight 847 from Denver to Miami. A passenger was removed from first class due to some kind of verification issue." Harrison's blood pressure spiked. "What kind of incident?" Emma consulted her notes. An elderly passenger, appeared to be traveling alone, was questioned about his seat assignment. When he couldn't provide additional verification beyond his boarding pass and ID, security was called and he was escorted off the aircraft. "Why wasn't I informed about this immediately?" Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, passenger removals happen several times a week. This seemed routine. No violence, no media coverage, no injuries. The passenger complied with removal orders." Harrison felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "What was the passenger's name?" "Vincent Rodriguez." The name meant nothing to Harrison, but something about the timing felt ominous. Yesterday, an elderly passenger named Vincent was removed from an Apex flight. Today, Vincent Rivera was destroying their company. "I want video footage from that flight. I want crew reports. I want passenger manifests. I want everything related to that incident on my desk within 1 hour." As Harrison's team scrambled to gather information, Vincent Rivera was sitting in a Denver hotel room, calmly watching CNBC's coverage of Apex Airline's stock collapse. The financial news anchors were baffled. Apex had reported strong quarterly earnings just weeks earlier. Their fleet was modern, their routes profitable, their customer metrics solid. Yet their largest investor had suddenly abandoned them with no warning or explanation. Vincent muted the television and opened his laptop. His email inbox contained dozens of messages from financial journalists, industry analysts, and competitor airlines, all seeking insight into Rivera Capital's dramatic move. He ignored them all and composed a single email to Derek Harrison. The message was brief. "Mr. Harrison, yesterday, your airline removed a passenger from Flight 847 based solely on assumptions about his appearance and economic status. Your crew demonstrated discrimination, your security protocols enabled prejudice, and your company's culture revealed itself to be fundamentally incompatible with basic human dignity. The passenger you removed was me. Consider this your resignation notice from any business relationship with Rivera Capital Management. Vincent Rivera, Chairman and CEO, Rivera Capital Management." Vincent hit send and closed his laptop. Derek Harrison was reviewing security footage from Flight 847 when his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, you have an urgent email from Vincent Rivera." Harrison's hands trembled as he opened the message. He read it once, then again, then a third time, each reading deepening his understanding of the catastrophe that had befallen his company. The elderly passenger in the worn coat and crooked glasses, the one that his crew had dismissed as unworthy of first class, was one of the most powerful men in global finance. Harrison sank into his chair, the full magnitude of the disaster washing over him. This wasn't just about money or stock prices. This was about a fundamental failure of human decency that had now been exposed at the highest levels of the business world. He immediately called an emergency meeting of his senior leadership team. Within an hour, 15 executives crowded into the boardroom, their faces reflecting the same confusion and panic that Harrison felt. "We need to figure out what triggered this. Rivera Capital doesn't dump investments on a whim. Something happened, and I want to know what it was." Emma Sullivan, Apex's head of customer relations, raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, there was an incident yesterday on Flight 847 from Denver to Miami. A passenger was removed from first class due to some kind of verification issue." Harrison's blood pressure spiked. "What kind of incident?"
Emma consulted her notes. An elderly passenger appeared to be traveling alone, was questioned about his seat assignment. When he couldn't provide additional verification beyond his boarding pass and ID, security was called and he was escorted off the aircraft. Why wasn't I informed about this immediately? Emma shifted uncomfortably. Sir, passenger removals happen several times a week. This seemed routine. No violence, no media coverage, no injuries. The passenger complied with removal orders. Harrison felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. What was the passenger's name? Vincent Rodriguez. The name meant nothing to Harrison, but something about the timing felt ominous. Yesterday, an elderly passenger named Vincent was removed from an Apex flight. Today, Vincent Rivera was destroying their company. I want video footage from that flight. I want crew reports. I want passenger manifests. I want everything related to that incident on my desk within 1 hour. As Harrison's team scrambled to gather information, Vincent Rivera was sitting in a Denver hotel room, calmly watching CNBC's coverage of Apex Airline's stock collapse. The financial news anchors were baffled. Apex had reported strong quarterly earnings just weeks earlier. Their fleet was modern, their routes profitable, their customer metrics solid. Yet their largest investor had suddenly abandoned them with no warning or explanation. Vincent muted the television and opened his laptop. His email inbox contained dozens of messages from financial journalists, industry analysts, and competitor airlines, all seeking insight into Rivera Capital's dramatic move. He ignored them all and composed a single email to Derek Harrison. The message was brief. Mr. Harrison, yesterday, your airline removed a passenger from Flight 847 based solely on assumptions about his appearance and economic status. Your crew demonstrated discrimination, your security protocols enabled prejudice, and your company's culture revealed itself to be fundamentally incompatible with basic human dignity. The passenger you removed was me. Consider this your resignation notice from any business relationship with Rivera Capital Management. Vincent Rivera, Chairman and CEO, Rivera Capital Management. Vincent hit send and closed his laptop. Derek Harrison was reviewing security footage from Flight 847 when his assistant knocked on the door. Sir, you have an urgent email from Vincent Rivera. Harrison's hands trembled as he opened the message. He read it once, then again, then a third time, each reading deepening his understanding of the...
She's the employee who learned the hardest lesson of her career yesterday. People who've experienced failure often make the best teachers. Vincent continued, Chloe will design training programs based on what she did wrong, ensuring other employees don't repeat her mistakes. She'll travel with you on those monthly flights, observing interactions and identifying areas for improvement. Harrison realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Instead of simply punishing failure, Vincent was transforming it into a catalyst for systemic change. Mr. Rivera, why are you giving us this opportunity? Vincent considered the question. Because punishment without the possibility of redemption is just revenge, and revenge doesn't change anything. The announcement of Rivera Capital's conditional reinvestment in Apex Airlines sent shockwaves through the business world. Financial analysts struggled to understand the precedent being set. A major investor had pulled billions from a company due to customer service failures, then offered to return the investment based on specific cultural changes. It was unprecedented in its approach to corporate accountability. Chloe Johnson received the news of her new position with a mixture of relief and terror. She had gone from terminated employee to senior executive in the span of 72 hours, but the responsibility was overwhelming. Her first assignment was to write a detailed account of every decision, assumption, and action that had led to Vincent's removal from the aircraft. The document would become the foundation for new training protocols. As Chloe began writing, she was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about her own biases. She had genuinely believed she was protecting the airline and its premium passengers. She had never considered that her assumptions about who belonged in first class were rooted in prejudice rather than policy. The hardest part was acknowledging that Vincent's appearance shouldn't have mattered at all. A valid boarding pass and identification were the only requirements for any seat on any aircraft. Everything else was subjective judgment masquerading as professional protocol. Derek Harrison's first undercover flight was scheduled for the following month. He would travel from Chicago to Los Angeles as Derek Harris, with documentation prepared by the same security team that had handled Vincent's cover identity. Harrison had never flown commercial without VIP treatment. He had never waited in normal security lines, never competed for overhead bin space, never experienced the casual indignities that regular passengers accepted as normal. The prospect terrified him, but it also excited him. For the first time in years, he would see his airline through the eyes of the people who actually paid for tickets rather than the executives who collected bonuses. Vincent Rivera returned to New York 3 days after sending his email to Derek Harrison. He walked into Rivera Capital's headquarters as himself, expensive suit, confident bearing, surrounded by the subtle indicators of wealth and power that opened doors automatically. The contrast with his Denver experience was stark and deliberate. Maya Brooks met him at the elevator, her relief visible. "How did it go?" Vincent smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in days. "Better than expected. Sometimes the worst situations create the best opportunities for change." As they walked toward his office, Vincent reflected on the broader lessons of the past week. Discrimination wasn't usually the result of malicious intent. More often, it was the product of unconscious bias, inadequate training, and systems that prioritized assumptions over humanity. Punishing individuals for systemic failures accomplished nothing, but creating accountability mechanisms that transformed failures into learning opportunities, that could change everything. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Rivera, this is Chloe Johnson. I start my new position tomorrow. I wanted you to know that I will spend every day making sure no passenger ever experiences what I put you through. Thank you for believing I could be better than my worst moment." Vincent showed the message to Maya. "This is why I made the deal with Harrison. Anyone can destroy something when they have power, but it takes real courage to build something better." Maya nodded, understanding the deeper philosophy behind Vincent's unconventional approach. The board was concerned about the financial losses from the rapid divestiture. "We'll recover those losses and more, but more importantly, we'll have helped create a model for how corporations can address discrimination systematically rather than just paying lip service to diversity and inclusion." 6 months later, Vincent was reviewing quarterly reports when Maya knocked on his office door. "You need to see this," she said, handing him a tablet, displaying a news article. The headline read, "Apex Airlines wins industry award for customer service excellence. Revolutionary training program eliminates passenger discrimination complaints." Vincent scrolled through the article, which detailed Apex's transformation under Derek Harrison's leadership. Customer satisfaction scores had reached industry-leading levels. Employee morale surveys showed dramatic improvements. Most importantly, discrimination complaints had dropped to 0 across all passenger categories. The article quoted Chloe Johnson extensively. She had become a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, sharing her story of how unconscious bias had nearly destroyed her career and cost her company billions of dollars. "I learned the hard way that dignity isn't a luxury amenity. It's a basic human right that every passenger deserves, regardless of how they look or how much money we think they have," Chloe was quoted as saying. Vincent set down the tablet and walked to his office window looking out over Manhattan's skyline. Somewhere in that maze of buildings were thousands of people making split-second judgments about others based on appearance, assumptions, and unconscious bias. Vincent's phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek Harrison. "Vincent, I wanted to thank you personally. We just posted our best quarterly earnings in company history. But more than that, I wanted you to know that your approach has changed how I think about leadership entirely." "How so?" "I used to think my job was to maximize shareholder value, period. Everything else was secondary. But watching our transformation over the past 6 months, I've realized that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right, it's actually more profitable in the long run." Derek continued, "Happy employees provide better service. Better service creates loyal customers. Loyal customers generate sustainable revenue. It's not complicated, but somehow the entire industry had lost sight of these basics." Vincent smiled.
And how are your monthly undercover flights going? Derek laughed, terrifying and enlightening in equal measure. Last month, I sat next to a single mother who was flying to her father's funeral. She was stressed about the cost of the ticket, worried about her connecting flight, and trying to keep her toddler calm. Our flight attendant, Marcus, spent the entire flight helping her, getting coloring books for the kid, explaining the connection process, and even walking her to the next gate during his break. That's exactly the kind of service that builds loyalty. Here's the thing, Vincent. Marcus told me later that he learned those behaviors in Chloe's training program. The same woman who once removed you from a flight is now teaching other employees how to see the humanity in every passenger. Vincent felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with financial returns. People are capable of remarkable growth when given the opportunity. I have another favor to ask. Would you consider speaking at our annual leadership conference? I think our executives could benefit from hearing your perspective on the relationship between moral leadership and business success. Vincent considered the request. He rarely spoke at industry events, preferring to work behind the scenes, but this situation felt different. I'll do it, but on one condition. I want to speak alongside Chloe Johnson. Her story is more powerful than mine. Done. 3 months later, Vincent stood on the stage of Apex Airline's leadership conference, looking out at an audience of several hundred executives from across the aviation industry. Beside him stood Chloe Johnson, no longer the uncertain flight attendant who had made a career-defining mistake, but a confident professional who had transformed that mistake into a mission. Vincent began his presentation with a simple question. How many of you have ever been misjudged based on your appearance? Nearly every hand in the audience went up. Then you understand exactly how I felt when I was removed from Flight 847. The difference is that I had the power to impose consequences for that treatment. Most people don't. He clicked to his next slide, which showed a photograph of himself in the worn coat and crooked glasses he had worn during his undercover trip. This is what power looks like when it doesn't announce itself. This is what wealth looks like when it doesn't need to prove itself. And this is what happens when we judge people by surfaces instead of substance. He gestured to Chloe. But this story isn't really about me. It's about Chloe and the choice she made when confronted with her own unconscious bias. Chloe stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. I removed Mr. Rivera from that flight because he didn't look like what I thought a first-class passenger should look like. I had created a mental profile based on clothing, luggage, and behavior, and when he didn't match that profile, I decided he didn't belong. She paused, making eye contact with audience members throughout the room. I was wrong. Not just about Mr. Rivera specifically, but about the entire premise of my judgment. Nobody earns dignity by meeting our expectations. Everyone deserves dignity simply by being human. Vincent resumed his presentation. Chloe could have been fired and forgotten. Instead, she was given the opportunity to transform her mistake into systemic change. The results speak for themselves. He clicked to a slide showing Apex's customer satisfaction scores over the past year, a dramatic upward trajectory that coincided with the implementation of Chloe's training programs. This improvement didn't happen because we hired different people or changed our policies. It happened because we changed.
Lewis, are you still working airport security? Yes, sir, but I've been thinking about what you said that day, about remembering the moment and what we did or didn't do. I've been trying to change how I handle similar situations. Vincent pulled out a business card. I want you to call this number and ask for Maya Brooks. Tell her I recommended you for our corporate security consulting program. Rodriguez stared at the card in disbelief. Sir, I don't understand. You were part of a flawed system, but you're also capable of helping fix that system. The question is whether you're willing to do the work. Rodriguez nodded emphatically. Yes, sir, absolutely. As the conference concluded, Vincent reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple flight from Denver to Miami. What had started as a routine undercover assessment had evolved into something much larger, a case study in how power could be used to create positive change rather than simply extract revenge. 6 months later, Vincent received an email that made him smile. It was from a passenger named Roberto Martinez, who had flown on Apex Airlines the previous week. "Mr. Rivera, I heard about your story through the news coverage of Apex's transformation. I wanted to share my own experience. I'm a mechanic who was flying to my daughter's wedding. I was worried about fitting in with the other passengers because I couldn't afford expensive clothes for the trip. Instead, the entire crew went out of their way to make me feel welcomed and valued. The flight attendant even took a photo of me in my seat to send to my daughter. I've never experienced that level of service on any airline. Whatever you did to change this company, thank you." Vincent forwarded the email to Derek Harrison and Chloe Johnson with a simple note: "This is what success looks like." The impact of the Apex Airlines transformation rippled throughout the industry. Other airlines began implementing similar training programs, recognizing that discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically stupid. Passengers who felt valued became loyal customers. Employees who felt empowered to treat everyone with dignity took pride in their work. Vincent started receiving invitations to speak at business schools, where he shared the story as a case study in moral leadership. His central message was always the same: power without empathy was destructive, but power combined with empathy could transform entire industries. The story also attracted attention from lawmakers and civil rights organizations, who recognized its potential as a model for addressing systemic discrimination in other sectors. If a single incident could transform an entire airline's culture, what other changes might be possible with the right combination of accountability and opportunity? But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was personal. Vincent had spent decades building wealth and influence, but the Apex Airlines incident had shown him how to use that power for something more important than profit margins. On the one-year anniversary of his removal from Flight 847, Vincent decided to take another undercover trip. This time, he flew Apex Airlines from Denver to Miami, booking the same route and the same seat where his journey had begun. The flight attendant who greeted him was Marcus Thompson, the same man who had been a passenger on the original flight. Marcus had been so inspired by the company's transformation that he had left his consulting job to join Apex's customer service team. "Welcome aboard, sir," Marcus said with genuine warmth. "Is there anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable?" Vincent looked around the cabin, noting the subtle changes that had occurred over the past year. The crew's interactions with passengers were noticeably more attentive and respectful. The boarding process had been modified to eliminate opportunities for discrimination. Even the airline's policies had been rewritten to emphasize dignity and inclusion. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Vincent closed his eyes and reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought him to this moment. A year ago, he had been humiliated and dismissed on this same route. Today, he was flying on an airline that had become a model for the entire industry. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick. It had required sustained effort, difficult conversations, and a willingness to change deeply ingrained behaviors. But it had worked. During the flight, Vincent struck up a conversation with the passenger beside him, an elderly woman named Rosa Garcia, who was flying to visit her grandchildren. "I haven't flown in years," Rosa confided. "I was nervous about how I'd be treated. My clothes aren't fancy, and I don't really know how all these modern systems work. How has your experience been so far?" Rosa's face lit up. "Wonderful! The gate agent helped me with my boarding pass. The security officer was so patient when I had trouble with my shoes. And this flight attendant, Marcus, he's been checking on me throughout the flight. I feel like I matter to them." Vincent smiled. "You do matter to them. That's exactly the point." As the plane descended toward Miami, Vincent realized that this story would never truly end. The work of creating dignity and respect in business and in society was ongoing. Every interaction, every decision, every moment of choosing empathy over indifference contributed to the larger effort. The plane touched down smoothly, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Vincent remained seated for a moment, watching the organized chaos of deplaning. Marcus approached him one final time. "Sir, I hope you enjoyed your flight. Is there anything else I can do for you?" Vincent looked up at the young man who had transformed his own career in response to witnessing discrimination. "You've already done more than you know." As Vincent walked through the Miami International Airport, he reflected on the power of second chances. Chloe Johnson had been given an opportunity to transform her mistake into a mission. Derek Harrison had been given the chance to redefine his understanding of leadership. An entire industry had been given the opportunity to examine its own biases and create better systems. But perhaps most importantly, Vincent himself had been given the chance to use his power for something more than just profit margins, to create lasting change that would affect thousands of future passengers who would never know his name but would benefit from his experience. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Rivera, this is Captain Sarah Chen from Apex Flight 847. I heard about your story through the crew training. I wanted you to know that we begin every flight briefing by reminding ourselves that we have the privilege of serving people at important moments in their lives. Thank you for helping us remember why we chose this profession." Vincent typed back a simple response: "Thank you for choosing to serve with dignity." As he walked toward the airport exit, Vincent considered the question he often asked himself: what would the world look like if everyone with power chose to use it for positive change? The answer was beginning to emerge, one transformed company at a time, one changed policy at a time, one moment of choosing empathy over indifference at a time. The story of Flight 847 had become more than an anecdote about discrimination and consequences. It had become a blueprint for how accountability could create transformation, how power could serve justice, and how one person's courage to demand dignity could ripple outward to create systematic change. Vincent stepped into the Miami sunshine, already planning his next undercover assessment. There were other industries to evaluate, other systems to improve, other opportunities to prove that treating people with dignity wasn't just morally right, it was the foundation of sustainable success. The passenger had become the catalyst, the victim had become the architect of change, and the story that began with humiliation had transformed into a testament to the power of turning painful experiences into purposeful action. In boardrooms across the country, executives were asking themselves a new question: what would Vincent Rivera think about how we treat our customers? It was exactly the question Vincent had hoped they would ask. And somewhere in the sky above America, flight crews were greeting passengers with a renewed commitment to dignity, respect, and the radical idea that everyone deserves to be treated as if they matter, because they do. Now here's the question that should keep you awake at night. If you had Vincent's power, would you have used it for revenge or for change? And more importantly, in your own life, when you see someone being treated unfairly, what do you choose to do about it? Don't just watch these stories, become part of the solution. Because the next time someone judges you by your appearance, remember that dignity isn't earned by meeting their expectations. It's your right simply because you're human. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of how they look or how much money you think they have. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Vincent's situation? Your answer might reveal more about your character than you think.